All right, welcome to this presentation of Prismo Metals. I'm the CEO of Prismo Metals, Alain, and with me today is Steve Robertson, who's our president, has a long history in successfully looking for large copper deposits. We'll get to that in a second. So first of all, I'd like to start with the background to the company. I'm one of the co-founders of Prismo Metals. We put the company together in 2019 and took it public. And the idea really came about when I had the opportunity to move from where I was born and raised in Montreal to Tucson, Arizona in 2015. And then I had the pleasure of meeting with Dr. Peter Megaw and Dr. Craig Gibson. We all became friends and business associates and still are today. And we started the company with two projects. One is Palos Verdes, silver gold prospect in the Panuco District, and Los Pavitos, a very large, interesting orogenic gold play in Sonora State. The project Palos Verdes was generated by Craig Gibson, and it's now been surrounded by Vizsla Silver. They're one of our large shareholders, and we'll give you more background into that. And Los Pavitos was generated by Rafael Gallardo from Minera Cascabel, Peter's outfit in Mexico, where they've been working there. Peter's been working there for 40 years almost. And fast forward to January 2023, we decided to diversify a little bit out of Mexico. We love Mexico. We think it's a great jurisdiction, but some investors are, let's say, a little more careful than they used to be. So we optioned 75% of a very large copper prospect in Arizona called Hot Breccia. And that's when I met Steve Robertson for the first time. Steve has been working with my partner, Peter Megaw, for decades. But I met him for the first time January 2023, and he was a technical advisor to Hot Breccia project. And eventually we asked him to join our management team, and he did so this year in May. Before I turn it over to Steve to talk about the project themselves, if you look on the right-hand side of the slide, Steve likes to say for people to make money in exploration, they really should be looking for three things: the right people, the right project, and the right timing. I'm convinced that we have the right people. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Steve will tell you more about the projects, and we're convinced we have the right projects. Certainly have two of them have immediate substantial upside, and the right timing. We've seen commodity prices firm up in 2024, so we think that the timing's pretty good. The right people. What's the right people? Well, the right people to us is the right balance between successful explorers and people who have capital markets experience. You can have geos that have great capital markets expertise, but we certainly need the right balance to create a successful public exploration company. And by successful explorer, what we mean is people that have made discoveries, not hopeful that maybe they'll retire with one discovery to their name. And Steve, Craig, Raphael, and Peter have significant discoveries attached to their name already, known for finding large deposits. Some of them are have become or will become large mines. And I've been in the capital markets industry since 1987. I have a law background. I have a corporate finance background, and been financing junior companies since '87. Before I pass it on to Steve, just a couple more things on how we do things. We like to say we're not a typical lifestyle company. Nobody has a fixed salary. Nobody has an employment agreement. We eat what we kill, in the sense that Steve and Craig are going to Hot Breccia as an example, and of course they're going to get paid for the work that they do at the project. Craig is at Palos Verdes project this week. He's going to get paid for that. But As an example, in early 2023, we were waiting for permits, so there was no operations really for 3 months while the permits were being issued, or I should say, very little um, work required, and people shouldn't get paid if they're not working. That's our philosophy. So how do we make money? Well, we like to own a lot of stock. We're kind of old fashioned. We want to make our money through the drill bit, and uh, although we've been public for 3.5 years, we only have 53.3 million shares outstanding, and management insiders and people close to us as 27.5. I actually think that it might be slightly higher than that because management has been buying more stock in the open market on a regular basis recently. And another big shareholder is Vizsla Silver. As I mentioned earlier, we'll talk more about that when we talk about Palos Verdes and how they became shareholders. And to this day, they own 9.6% of the 53.3 million shares outstanding. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Steve.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Alain. Just a brief bio on myself. I'm an exploration geologist, so I was one of the technical guys that Alain was referring to. And I've been at this for about 35 years. I worked for Imperial Metals, a mid-tier producer and operator in British Columbia for about 24 years. And that was a great training ground for me. It was a medium-sized company, and so I got an opportunity to do a lot of different things with the company. But I spent most of my time doing exploration. We acquired the Red Chris project in 2007, and that was really the big milestone in my career there. We spent 5 years drilling deep holes there. All the holes that we drilled were more than a kilometer deep, and we transformed that deposit from being what everybody thought was another typical little BC porphyry, and actually proved that it was a world-class giant with substantial reserves. And we actually developed a mine based on that deposit. It's now a mine that's operated by Newmont, one of the world's largest mining companies. Now, what that did for me is it really inspired me about big copper price, and that's really why I'm here with Prismo. Is the I think one of the most exciting copper plays I've seen in a long time is Hot Breccia. It's in the heart of the Arizona copper belt, one of the most prolific copper belts on the face of the planet. And we're surrounded by world-class deposits, including just to the east of us is Morenci. It's the biggest one so far in the state. It's got a total endowment of 75 billion pounds of copper. 35 kilometers to the south of us is San Manuel, which is North America's first block cave. And just to the northwest of us is Resolution. I think Resolution is one of the greatest exploration discovery stories in the history of our business. The top of the deposit is 1.2 kilometers down. The bottom is 2 kilometers down. And so far, it's defined as about 1.6 billion tons of 1.6% copper. So not only huge, but also high grade. And quite frankly, it's not drilled off yet. It could be much larger than that. So it's really the inspiration for our exploration at Hot Breccia. And you'll see as we go through the presentation, we think that we've got a lot of similarities in terms of the geology and the geologic setting with Resolution, and good reason to go and drill it at Hot Breccia. Before I leave this slide, I just want to point out that we've got excellent infrastructure. Highway 77 goes right through the property, so we've got good access. We've got nearby towns. Virtually 100% of the people that are in those towns are either employed directly or indirectly by mining. We're an hour-and-a-half drive from both Tucson and Phoenix, so we're close, but not too close. And amazingly enough, there's a smelter 2 kilometers away from the edge of the property. There's only 3 copper smelters in the continental U.S., and we've got one of them immediately next door to us. So really, from a logistical perspective, it's hard to imagine an exploration project that's better situated than Hot Breccia. So now we'll talk about the geology of Hot Breccia a little bit. You can see on the right-hand side of this slide a cross-section that was produced a couple of years ago by a gentleman named Briggs, and he did a dissertation that was the history of the Christmas mine. And Christmas was an amazing small mine. Only produced a moderate tonnage, but it was pretty high-grade material, produced from 1905 to 1982. And over that period, production was about 25 million tons of 1.5% copper. So high grade, but with moderate tonnage. Now, all the ore, or most of the ore that was hosted at Christmas was in those 3 blue units you see at the top left-hand side. Those are limestones, carbonate rocks. Well, limestones and dolostone. And what happened was the big red that you see in the middle of the image, that's an intrusive that came up along a fault, a polyphased intrusive, and it brought with it a lot of hot, acidic, metal-laden fluids. And those hot fluids, when they went out into the country rock, in the surrounding country rock, and they encountered the limestones, there was a chemical reaction that neutralized the fluids and it caused the solubility of the metals to go down, and it dumped out all of the metals it was carrying. And that's why you get the beautiful high grades like you see at Christmas. You get these wonderful high grade zones actually across Arizona when you see this situation occurring. Well, over on the right-hand side of this image, you can see the geology that would represent the Hot Breccia project that we've got immediately next door to Christmas Farm. And we've got those same 3 blue units, but you can see they're buried at depth. They've got that big, thick green Williamson Canyon volcanics that's sitting on top. And those volcanics do a good job of masking the process that's going on down below in the limestones. But we think that there's a pretty good reason to believe that same ore forming process was going on. This is very similar to the structural situation that resolution has. And I'll point out the similarity. You could use this exact same cross-section to represent resolution, just 40 kilometers to the northwest. Next door to them, there was a little mine called Magma that produced for many decades, and it shut down in the mid-1990s. That mine produced a moderate amount of tonnage of high-grade mineralization. It was about 20 million tons of 5% copper that was produced over the years. And as it was getting close to being shut down, the geologists there decided that they could probably go and look for the roots of the system, because it was a pretty spectacular little mine. And they thought there's probably something big at depth driving this. And it actually took a few years, but eventually they tapped into resolution for 1.6 billion tons of 1.6% copper. And it would be down on the right-hand side where you see the what I was representing as the highly prospective rocks at Hot Breccia. So very similar structural situation, the same age of host rocks, the same age of laramide intrusive. I mean, the similarities are really quite numerous, and just based on that thesis alone, it's a pretty good idea to go and do some exploration at Hot Breccia. But there's more than just the theory about the similarity with resolution. We've actually got empirical evidence that there is a mineralizing system percolating at depth, and you'll note that the name of the property is Hot Breccia. That's because we have these breccias that show up in those green Williamson Canyon volcanics that we were pointing out earlier. And what has happened is we believe that interaction between the host rocks and those hot acidic fluids created a buildup of pressure. There was a lot of heat in the system as well. There was magma. And when that heat and pressure needed to release, it released very violently to the surface. And what it did was it broke up a lot of the rocks at depth, carried them up to surface, and then the magma solidified. And it actually, basically, was Mother Nature's sampling program. It's to sample the rocks that we know came from at least a kilometer depth. And coming from at least a kilometer depth is a good indication there was a lot of energy in the system, so that there was, we know that this is a substantial system, that it's not just a little burp that came up. This is something that took a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And of course, when you get into a system that's got a lot of energy and a lot of heat, polyphased intrusives, there's going to be a lot of hot acidic fluids, there's going to be a lot of metal, and that creates the potential for a much larger deposit. So these are all really positive indicators to us. Now, this particular breccia that we see here, when you take a close look at those angular fragments that are in the breccia, we can actually see some of them are mineralized with copper, and they're highly altered. So the limestones are actually altered to skarn, and so these are all the things that we want to see. As a matter of fact, earlier this year, we had some geologists that were out doing a mapping and sampling of the breccia's surface. I don't think this, there we go. And this is Octavio, one of our project geologists. He was out doing some sampling in the breccias. You can see these brown-looking rocks like the one in the left-hand photograph. There's several of them in this little draw here. And the one on the left-hand side actually averaged 5.7% copper. So not only is there a mineralizing system with depth, but we know it's a high-grade mineralizing system with depth. So this is really a wonderful indicator for us. It's just another small piece of information that we put into the puzzle board to try and figure out the big picture. And this is a good clue that will help exploration as we move forward. So these breccias are amazing things. We're not the first guys to recognize the potential that they represent, though. And back in 1970, there was a fellow named Larry Barrett that did his master's thesis out on what is the current day hot breccia property. He mapped all those surface rocks, and he noticed the breccias. And after he finished with his thesis, he went to work for Kennecott, and he convinced Kennecott that it would be a good exploration program to go and do some deep drilling to see if there's a good mineralizing system percolating at depth. And you can see on this image here, those are the historic holes on the property. There's half a dozen drill holes that were drilled by Kennecott or a subsidiary of Kennecott. And there's a couple of drill holes that are near the property as well that were drilled by Phelps Dodge. And sure enough, they went down through those overlying volcanics, and then when they got down into the Paleozoic carbonates down below, they were well altered and well mineralized. So really a very successful exploration program was going on there with the drilling that they did in the 1970s. Unfortunately, the 1980s came along, and what happened in the early 1980s was the price of copper fell off a cliff, and suddenly nobody had any interest in copper anymore. As a matter of fact, the Christmas mine next door closed its doors permanently, and it was actually dismantled, and you know, that really was sort of it took the wind out of the sails for the project. So there was no momentum, even though they'd been having great success, and the project just continued to sit there with no activity going on for a couple of decades after that. Now the core was actually taken to a warehouse in Tucson. There was a regional manager named Linus Keating who became the keeper of that core. And one of the projects that he came up with was in the early 2000s. He actually went and resampled and relogged the drill core, and he resampled it to see if there was any gold in the system. Now, he didn't find much in the way of gold in the system. There was some, but not much. But what happened was he was very impressed with the extent and strength of the alteration that he saw in the drill core and the strength of the mineralization. And so he kept that in the back of his mind. Eventually, Kennecott dropped the property. They just didn't have any more work going on there, and they threw the core out. They actually took it to the dump. So crying shame, but these things happen. And so after they dropped the property, Linus was retired from Kennecott, and he actually went out and picked up the property and decided to restake it, hoping to attract somebody to come in and do the work to continue on with the exploration. But we're the first company to actually have the opportunity in over 50 years to come in with a fresh set of eyes and a modern exploration toolbox to pick up where Kennecott dropped off the program in the mid-1970s. One of the things that we did first off was do a ZTEM survey. So ZTEM is a great geophysical technique that takes a look for deep conductors. And you can see this big pink blob that's sitting in the bottom right-hand corner of this image. And that's a conductive anomaly at least 1.5 kilometers long that's sitting down where the limestone should be. Now, limestone should be non-conductive rocks. So what would be the cause of a big conductor like that sitting down where the limestone should be? And one good explanation for that is if those rocks are highly altered and mineralized with copper, they could become a good conductor. So we're hoping that that's the case, and we've got a really good drill target to go after here. We could see from the placement of the anomaly that it's probably in a slightly different position. Well, let's put it this way. Kennecott would have drilled the property a little bit differently if they had known about this conductor being where it is. We're going to take it a step further. We've employed an AI company out of California who is taking the geophysical results and they're reprocessing it with their proprietary software. and they're actually going to optimize the interpretation of this anomaly so that we can make the best use possible of our drill program when we get going. So our proposal is to come into this area with 5 1-kilometer deep drill holes. Our idea is we want to go through all the way through that blue stratigraphy on our property, so all the way down to the Paleozoic carbonate sequence, which we think are the highly prospective rocks. If it takes us 1,300 kilometers, we'll drill 1,300 kilometers, but we expect that it'll be about a kilometer for each drill hole to test that entire column of rocks. And 5 drill holes should get us not only into the hydrothermal system, but help us determine whether we're getting closer to the source or further away from it. We'll see those vectors in the different minerals that we see in the drill holes. And so this is our first stage of follow-up exploration. You can see in this image the 2 outlines that right in the center of the image. The red outline is the projection of that pink blob to the surface. So that's the ZTEM anomaly projected to surface. The purple outline that's somewhat coincident with it is the outline of the resolution deposit 40 kilometers to the northwest. And we've just dragged it down so that we can do a size comparison. You can see that the anomaly that we're looking at depth is the same scope and scale as a resolution size target. So very encouraging for us. So that's a very simple explanation of Hot Breccia and what our plans are for that project. Palos Verdes is our project that's down in Sinaloa State in Mexico. It's the one that Alain had referred to that Craig Gibson had generated. And it's in the Panuco District and surrounded by Vizsla silver. This is a project where we're about to embark on a drilling program to do the next phase of definition of the Palos Verdes vein, which runs across our project. And you can see that there's a large district here. I think we're all familiar with the success Vizsla has had in making discoveries in the western end of the district. We're part of that same bonanza grade silver district, only we're on the east end of it, and we're getting similar quantum grades that Vizsla has been intersecting. I think our best intercept is about 0.5 meter of 11.5 kilos silver equivalent. So very high grade material, and about half of that value comes actually from gold. So it's a gold rich district as well. This is a closer look at our project. You can see the property outline in purple, and the proposed drill program that we're about to embark on. You can see the collars that are off the property to the south. And the idea here is that we've done a pretty good job of just defining the western side, western portion of the property where the vein is there with some shallow drilling. Now we need to step back so that we can take a deeper cut at it and define where the vein goes to depth. And you can also see there's a stippled area that goes north-south through the property, and there's something that happens at that fault. It's very common in this district to see this. You get a little bit of displacement across the fault. We believe that the vein on the east side of that fault has been displaced downward. And so by drilling these deeper holes, we'll actually be able to find out where that vein is displaced on the east side. So this is a unique situation where we're actually going to be collaring our drill holes on our neighbor's property. We've got a very cooperative relationship with Vizsla, and we've got a technical committee that's comprised of Craig Gibson, Peter Megaw, and Jesus Valador, who's the VP of Exploration for Vizsla. And they share ideas and agree on an approach to the exploration. And it was agreed between the group that being able to step back on the Vizsla property would be a great advantage for everybody to be able to understand this system. So we should have I know that the drill crew is on the property right now, and we think we're just a few days away from actually having the drill turning there and embarking on this next program. So that's a quick explanation of the 2 main projects in the company. And I think I'll just briefly mention Las Pavitos. This is the large-scale orogenic gold project that we're at the south end of this major gold belt that stretches all the way up through Sonora State and into California. And there are several multi-million ounce gold deposits that are defined along that trend. And we're at the southern end of that. Actually, it's the southern extension of that belt because it wasn't known to reach this far south, but we have all the right structure and the right elements in place. There's no reason why it shouldn't be there. And in our first drill program, we were able to intercept 6.5 meters of 10.2 grams gold and 47 grams of silver. So proof positive that we do have an orogenic gold system on the property. We've only drilled 2,700 meters here. Our next step on this project is to send a prospecting and mapping team out to do some of the boots on the ground type work that is necessary to advance the project. We're probably going to do some ground geophysics as well and set ourselves up so that when we come to the next phase of diamond drilling, which will probably be in 2025, we'll be able to use that drill footage more efficiently on the basis of the groundwork that we're going to do this year. So lots of exciting things going on. Those are the three legs to the stool that is Prismo Metals. And I think that we've got three excellent projects in the company.
Steve, I think I'm going to go back here to this slide and explain a little bit how Vizsla Silver became involved with Prismo Metals and how it came about that they own 9.6%. So this is the map of the district. And if you look on the west side in pink, that's the Vizsla resource outline, the Napoleon vein that everybody's heard about, the Coppola, and that's where their resource, which you see on the left side of the slide, comes from, and what supports in great part their almost it's a little less today, $550 million market cap. And then if you look on the northeast side of the district, you see Palos Verdes. So the outline of our concession is in yellow, and we're surrounded on three sides by Vizsla. The well-known, highly mineralized Palos Verdes vein extends on the west side. And then on the east side of the fault that you see in the middle of the map here, we lose the Palos Verdes vein. We think it's displaced downwards, and some of the drill holes here are meant to be trying to find the Palos Verdes vein at depth. So the vein extends to the west, it extends to the east, and it sort of maybe dips underneath the Vizsla property. So what the two companies are doing, working together, mainly through the joint technical committee, three doctors, Dr. Gibson, Dr. Villador, and Dr. Megaw, is to explore this part of the district without being constrained by the legal boundaries of the concessions. And in January 2023, Vizsla agreed to invest $2 million into Prismo. That's how they got their percentage ownership in us. And we continue to work closely with their management team and their technical team. And we're quite excited about this next phase of drilling. And hopefully we continue to see the Palos Verdes on the west side being identified at depth. And hopefully we find it in the east, which should be a tremendous news for our shareholders. A lot of our legacy shareholders, people who have been with us for 2-3 years, they know this project very well. They know Vizsla very well. And there are a lot of eyes on the upcoming assays, which should come out sometime. The first batch should be out in September. The last thing I'd like to discuss here is our cap table. So you will see the 27.5% ownership by officers, directors, advisors, founders. It should also say founders. 14.7 million shares. It's actually more today because, as I said, management keeps adding to their position with open market buys. Vizsla has 5.1 million. We completed a $3 million financing in December 2022 at 52 cents. So that's represents about 10.5% of the total. I mean, maybe people have traded that. It might be slightly higher, but it might be slightly lower. And the float is 52.4. And about a third of the float is held by some very good friends of mine at a brokerage firm in Canada, people who've been in this business over 40 years, very well-known brokers and their clients to be company builders. And so they're there to see it through. Been doing business with them since the early 90s. And then if you look at the bottom part of the cap table, we've got a bunch of warrants at 75 by those institutions. And that expires in December of this year. Vizsla has 2 million warrants at 75, and they got 550,000 warrants at 25, which gives you the weighted average exercise price of 65. And then management and directors have their typical RSUs, share appreciation rights, and options. And then the warrants, 3.839 million, that's at 25 cents, and that will expire in June of 2026. A very low market cap, about $12 million market cap, and in a very tight share structure. Been public 3.5 years and only 53.3 million shares outstanding. And we like to keep things that way. We're very diligent about how we do things, very diligent about how we price financings, and as you can see, that's one of the results of being careful about how you issue shares and when and under what circumstances.
What do you consider to be your greatest achievements, career-wise?
Career achievement, career-wise. Can't talk about our personal lives first?
Yeah, sure, if you want.
Well, okay, so yeah, let's be philosophical. Greatest achievement: married 30 years, 6 children, 5 grandchildren, 1 grandchild on the way. So that would be the greatest achievement. I would say professionally is the ability to have done things with integrity and honesty, and have developed a reputation for conducting myself in that kind of way in business. And so reputation is everything. So I'd say that would be it. If you're looking for things that are more pragmatic, I probably have taken more small companies public than anyone. Still doing what I'm doing, probably just because I've been doing it for so long and raised significant amounts of money. So that would be my answer.
On my side, I've only got 3 kids and 4 grandkids, so like the competitive nature in me wants to see if we can beat you somehow there, Alain. But obviously, we're cut from the same cloth, I believe, and have very similar values. So there's a good reason why we're working together and get along so well. For my personal background is very similar to Alain's. My professional background is quite different. I've spent most of my career being a technical person, and the big milestone for me would have been the exploration of red Chris. But after I turned entrepreneur, I worked on a team with Peter Megaw, where we made a nice discovery in northern British Columbia. The discovery hole there was 100 meters of 5% copper. And, there's, for a geologist, there's nothing like the thrill of discovery. It really is amazing when you walk out to the core table in the morning and you find the drillers complaining about how heavy the core boxes were the night before. That's really sends an adrenaline through your system that can't be replaced. And that's what drives me and other geologists to keep going, is we believe that potential is still out there for us to do it again. So, we build on our past successes.
Steve, you joined just a few months ago. What attracted you to Prismo?
Well, as Alain says, we dated for 15 months before we got more serious. I was an advisor to the company because they had optioned the Hot Breccia project, and Hot Breccia is really one of the best exploration copper plays I've seen in a long time, and I really wanted to continue to work on it, and I really got along well with Alain and Craig Gibson, the chief exploration officer, who used to be the president and CEO of the company. and so it just seemed to be a very natural fit to join the team when the opportunity arose. And I think I'll continue on here for quite a while if I can.
A question for both of you. How many shares do you hold of Prismo, and how material is it to your net worth?
Well, I'll go first. I was looking at that on the weekend, so I think well, I know I have about 2.5 million shares, a little bit, just a little bit more than that. I was looking at it this weekend. I think I bought, oh gosh, 800,000 shares in the open market in the last year. I would say so how significant it is, you know what? That's a very interesting question, and it should be asked and it should be answered. And my answer is, if we find what we're looking for at Hot Breccia, it will have a dramatic impact on finances, personal finances. If we find the Palos Verdes vein at depth on the west side of the fault, that will have an impact as well, and same thing on the east side. So it's about the potential, and people have been asking me, well, why do you buy in the open market? Well, I don't really invest a lot in small companies, speculative companies, unless I'm involved, and I'm involved in this one. And I don't have a geological background, as I mentioned earlier, but I've got great guys who are wonderful geologists, very experienced, very well known, great reputation, and following what they're doing, what they're recommending, I think that the odds are in our favor that we're gonna have a pretty successful 2024 stock wise, and so that's why I keep buying more.
For me, I joined the company later than Alain, so I've got some catching up to do. But I'm building a position in Prismo, and the same thing. I think we're at the point now where I think I'm exposed to close to 900,000 shares between the RSUs, options, and the actual shares that I own. And that's a big enough position that it could have a substantial impact on my future net worth. And so this is, I'm very comfortable being in this position. I'm not the largest shareholder in the company, but I've got enough incentive to make me work very diligently to try and make sure this is a big success.
So then, could you just walk me through the history of Prismo and how you got where you are today?
Okay, so the history is as simple as three guys who met each other and liked each other and recognized everybody's skills, mine being corporate finance and deal structuring, raising money, going public. So that was fairly evident. Craig and Peter are both doctors in geology, so their expertise is also fairly obvious. And so it was actually Craig that approached me and said, I'd really like to work with you. Why don't we team up? And I've got this Palos Verdes property in the Panuco District. I've drilled it, great bonanza grades. I think it would make a good property for an exploration company. And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, yes, I am interested. But let's ask Peter Megaw, who's one of our friends, see what he has anything in mind. Maybe he does have an idea. And as I mentioned, Minera Cascabel, his outfit in Mexico, had the Los Pavitos orogenic gold play. And he said, well, I'd really like to see this project advance. And so we structured a deal, and both projects were contributed into the company. Both projects have advanced quite dramatically since we went public, and we each do what we do best. Peter is an advisor to our company, is very generous with his time. He's been to all of our projects many times. He lives probably an hour and 30 minutes from Hot Breccia. I'm sure he'll be driving up there once the drill is turning in September. And he's been to Palos Verdes many times with the rest of the technical committee. And Craig, as Steve said, he was the president and CEO when we started. It was always viewed as a temporary thing because Craig really is a true and true field geologist. He loves to be looking at rocks and looking and walking and hiking, and that's where he's the most happy. And so now he's chief exploration officer, and then we split his previous role, president and CEO, between Steve and I.
What's the average quarterly G&A?
So we're a unique company, I think, in terms of how we view costs. And as I mentioned during, as I mentioned in all our presentation and in our deck, nobody's on a fixed salary. So the true fixed costs are about $350,000 a year. And the best example of why it doesn't make any sense to have employment agreements for people is an example I like to give. I think it was maybe January to April 2023. We were waiting for the drill permit to be issued for Los Pavitos, and we needed a new permit to drill on the east side of the fault at Palos Verdes. So other than advancing these permits forward, there was no geological activity. Why would you pay anyone to be sitting at home for 4 months, right? So that's one of the reasons why we believe in the model that we've adopted, is that people get paid when they do work. I do have friends in the industry here in Vancouver, and I see CEOs making 350, and the company really can't explore more than, say, 6-7 months a year. Why get paid for 12 months for 6 months, 7 months work, right? So we like to keep our fixed cost at the minimum, and then everything else is flexible. So if there's money and activity, we go to work, and we control our costs that way.
So what's the current cash and working capital position like?
So in June of this year, we raised $1.1 million, and we also own 500,000 shares of Vizsla Silver, which is probably $1.2 million in value. We'd prefer to keep those shares, but if needed, we could, we have that as liquidity. That came about by the fact that when they invested $2 million in Prismo in January 2023, it was part cash and part shares of Vizsla. And so we're financed to be able to conduct the current drilling program that's on the way at Palos Verdes. When I say it's on the way, the whole technical team's there, the driller's there, the driller's there. Things are being set up. When is it going to turn? Probably, a few days, but the whole technical team has been there since the 6th, I believe, so about a week ago. And we have no debt.
What's the total cost of the 2-stage program at Palos Verdes?
So we want to do 3,000 meters of drilling at Palos Verdes in stages. The cost there is about half of what it is at Hot Breccia for a number of reasons. So 200 a meter, and so that would be 200 a meter US for the whole 3,000. But the first phase, which is about 1,200, the way it's been structured and the budget that we've allocated to it is $380,000 Canadian, which is funded.
You could, though, with your cash balance, you could do the full program. Although it would be quite tight, but it's possible.
That's correct. No, I would say I would add is that one of the things that we are working on that we want to complete is to finance the entire 5,000 meters of drilling at Hot Breccia, and that's a $2 million US ticket item, and we have, Steve and I have been on the road. We've spoken with a lot of investment bankers and high net worth institutional types, There's not a doubt in my mind that the money's there. The one of the things that we were waiting for was to get the permit, which we got in June, and now we're in the summer holiday period of July and August, and so although we keep having meetings, but I think in early September we'll put that to bed and get drilling. Steve has been working diligently negotiating with drillers, and I think he's done a great job finding a driller that he likes, that Craig Gibson likes, at a price that we like. So because what you've seen in our industry is, while the big guys are still very busy working with big mining companies on the junior end of things, there are a lot of drillers. If that's their market, the junior explorers, and they're not as busy as they used to be. So it plays in our favor, and so we think we're going to have a very attractive budget with our estimated $2 million US for our 5,000 meters of drilling at Hot Breccia.
Peter, thank you for being here today.
Always a pleasure, Jasper.
Could you introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us about your career?
I'm Dr. Peter Megaw. I'm an exploration geologist. Have been looking for big, high-grade ore deposits for more than 40 years. Have been fortunate to find a couple. And primarily work in epithermal veins, carbonate replacement deposits, and porphyry copper systems, and looking at the interrelationship between all three of those gross divisions of ore deposits.
As an explorationist, what are you most proud of?
Oh, that's easy. My discovery of the Juanicipio system in the Fresnillo district in Mexico, which is now one of the world's largest primary silver mines.
If you would add one other discovery or advancement of a deposit, what would you say then?
Oh, that would be the Cinco de Mayo discovery that we made in Chihuahua, Mexico, basically working everywhere from understanding the regional controls on CRD systems in Mexico to recognizing that there was a gap in the chain of deposits and that there should be a big one there, and there is. So we followed it from first principles all the way through a discovery made through 100% cover. So it was a completely blind discovery. It was the result of a remarkable team effort.
So what attracted you to getting involved with Prismo?
Well, partially because they optioned a property from my associate company, Minera Cascabel in Mexico. So the Pavitos property was optioned from Cascabel. They have the Palos Verdes property in the Panuco District, where I have worked off and on since 1980. And also because of the Hot Breccia property, which was put together by a good friend and colleague of mine, Linus Keating. And I had contributed some old data on the property to him. And so I wound up being a very small shareholder in the underlying property position. And I know Alain, I know Craig. I went to school with Craig. I've worked with Steve Robertson off and on for since the late 1980s. So I know all the people. I like the people. I like the projects. Hot Breccia is less than 2 hours from the house, so it's an easy place to work.
How many shares do you hold of Prismo?
I don't really know. A bunch, but I don't know how many. Probably not enough. I mean, once they make the discovery, it won't be enough, but it's what it is. But I've participated in private...
It's a significant holding.
Yes. Yeah, I've participated in private placements. I've gotten shares through my relationship with Linus Keating. I've gotten shares through my relationship with Cascabel. So that's why I don't know what the number is.
It's a typical answer for a geologist.
And I'm not trading the stock, so it doesn't really matter.
Let's talk about Hot Breccia. So could we first start with what's the ownership structure of Hot Breccia, and how, if you could add some color to your earning agreement?
Steve? You want to start by your conflict?
Yeah, I'll declare a conflict. I'm the chairman of a company called Infinitum Copper, and Infinitum actually went out and optioned 100% of the project from Walnut Mines, which is a private company based out of Tucson, largely owned by Linus Keating. And Infinitum was focusing on a project, a different project, and as a result, Prismo came in to pick up the obligations for cash and work commitment on that option. And the idea was that at the end of the earn-in, there will be a JV form, Infinitum 25, Prismo 75%. And then Walnut Mines will have a 2% NSR. So that's how this ownership split goes.
How much do you have to spend, when could you potentially exercise?
The total required spend is 5.5 million. We're already substantially into that. I think this next 5,000 meter program that we want to embark on, and those are Canadian dollars, by the way, 5.5 million Canadian. By the time we finish this next phase of drilling, we're going to be pretty close to being done the earning portion of the
operation. And there are 3 years to do it, and I think the commitment for the current year is 1 million Canadian, and as we just said, we'll at least do 3 million. So we're, as Steve said, we're not only going to meet this year's commitment hands down, but very close to what we need to do in the next 3 years.
And so besides the 2% NSR that Walnut Mines will hold, are there any other royalties on the property? How's the infrastructure, road access, water also, etc.?
It's excellent. You can't get much better infrastructure than what we've got at Hot Breccia. The Highway 77 cuts right through the property. So, we've got good highway access, but then on the property, those drill roads that were built back in the 1970s are still in place and largely usable. I mean, we're going to need to do a little bit of maintenance to clean up the tops of some of the roads, but the road base is still in good condition, and that's how we intend to actually access the property this year. And we'll be drilling from sites that were already built 50 years ago.
Excellent. And is all of Hot Breccia on BLM land?
Yeah, it is. There's some state land that's that we need to go through on the access, but the actual property is all BLM land.
How long is your exploration permit valid, and how does it work with sort of number of pads? Can you drill freely, or do you have to sort of announce? If you could add to that.
Yeah, we've got the drill program permitted for 10 sites, and of course our initial program is only going to be 5 drill holes, so we're not going to need to use all 10 sites. But what we wanted to do was make sure that we had enough flexibility that we would be able to pick and choose. As I mentioned, we're having an AI company out of California that is reprocessing the geophysical information to make sure that we optimize the geophysical in Anomaly, and by having extra drill pads permitted, it gives us the flexibility to be able to change up our program to a certain degree. And with the deep targets, with slight change in the angle and orientation of the drill holes, we can actually cover a lot of ground from 10 drill pads up at surface.
And how long is the exploration permit valid?
I can't remember if it's 3 or 5 years. I think it's 5 years.
So then I think it would be good if you could give us an overview of the copper district in Arizona in which Hot Breccia is situated.
So worldwide, porphyry copper deposits are the principal source of copper. There's a couple of other deposit types that provide some, but most of the world's copper comes from what are called porphyry deposits. And these are deposits that are centered on large, what we call fertile or copper-rich intrusive systems. And as that magma system evolves, it concentrates the copper sort of in a cupola on top of the large magma body. And these deposits tend to occur in clusters in time and space. And Arizona and neighboring Sonora is the home of one of the world's largest and most productive porphyry copper clusters. So there's easily 25 currently and historically producing major copper mines. Arizona, where Hot Breccia is by far the largest copper producer in the United States. And we are host to a number of the largest porphyry coppers, not just in the United States, but in the world. And Hot Breccia happens to sit right in the middle of Main Street of the Arizona porphyry cluster between Morenci, which is one of the which I think is the second largest porphyry copper in the United States, and one of the biggest mines in the world for copper. And the resolution discovery that is being put into production slowly in the area of the old Superior District, where deep drilling has found over 3 billion tons of high-grade copper mineralization. And within that belt is the entire Globe Miami District, the Ray Mine, and right next to Hot Breccia is the historic Christmas Mine, which was a very rich copper skarn, cropped out on the surface, was mined until the early 1980s. And there's still lots of copper in the ground there. And we are on the other side of the major intrusion that hosts that. So in a regional sense, we are in serious elephant country as far as porphyry coppers are concerned.
So you have just acquired more data on Hot Breccia, including assay results from one of the old holes and also geological interpretation based on the data from the 3 first assays or drill holes. Could you summarize what you have acquired and how it helps you understand Hot Breccia better?
Okay, so Hot Breccia has seen historic drilling back in the 1970s. When people were looking for things that were pretty close to the surface, and the economic conditions were different. And we knew that there had been some drilling done there. We had fragmentary information on a few of those drill holes. We had sort of some summary information. And then this latest information includes the first hole that was drilled by Kennecott. It was drilled by their exploration division called Bear Creek Mining Company. I actually was working for Bear Creek just shortly after their holes were drilled there. I was not involved in the porphyry search. I was looking for silver in Mexico. That's when I was working in Panuco. But to me, the really exciting thing is essentially we just got a proof of concept hole for free. So we have information on their first drill hole that went down through the breccias or into the breccias, cutting beautiful breccia textures, intrusive rocks, giant fragments of mineralized skarn mineralization, which is what we expect to see. And we now have some concrete information about that. So it's really exciting to be able to go into our drilling program having a pretty good idea that what we have been able to theorize was there, backed by some incomplete information. Now the theory is well supported by the strong data we have from this hole. So it's a real game changer for the project. It's not sort of like, back a long time ago, we heard that some guys hit something. This is the data that shows what those guys hit. It was good copper grades over a good distance, and it was exactly the type of system that we expected to see. On the surface, we have fragments that are this big to this big of well mineralized skarn loaded with copper, up to multiple percents of copper. This hole cut what appears to have been fragments as much as 20 meters across. So a system that can move pieces of rock like that really cements the idea that this was a very potent, volatile, rich system, lots of juices, all the things you want to see.
Was there anything in the data that surprised you?
Yeah, seeing what appears to have been a breccia fragment 20 meters in diameter, that's pretty surprising. I mean, we're not 100% sure that that's what that was, but there's intrusive with breccia above it, intrusive breccia below it, and the fragment is mineralized and it has a rind of alteration at the top and the bottom. So that's what Kennecott interpreted it as 40 years ago or 50 years ago. Just the size of that fragment is amazing.
So in the first hole, OC1, what did it show in terms of rock and mineral types and also copper grades and widths?
Well, it showed at least 2 different types of intrusion. It found the mineralized pre-breccia intrusion. It found the intrusion that created the breccias. It found mineralized fragments of the early intrusive stage. And in a porphyry copper, you expect to see mineralization in the intrusion and in the wall rocks. And in this particular case, we know the porphyry was emplaced into a thick section of carbonate rocks. And when that gives you skarn, that gives you replacement mineralization. And there are fragments of mineralized skarn in the breccias that were cut in hole 1, OC1. Up to several percent copper. The big fragment, I think, is 20 some odd meters of a percent plus copper. I don't remember the numbers exactly, but good copper grades. I mean, having worked for Kennecott, we were steeped in the idea that if you're looking for a porphyry copper, you need 1 billion tons of 0.5% copper. And if you start cutting multiple tens of meters of 1% plus copper and fragments that are running 5 and 6% copper, it's telling you that the grade is there. Now you just have to make it big enough. And so that's the first step in any porphyry. And these kinds of grades suggest that the 0.5% copper grade is something we ought to be able to get past very easily. But again, the drill rig is coming, and we'll find out for ourselves when we get a few more holes into it.
So then, could you summarize why do you think, or why does Prismo think that there's a good probability that both Breccia host a sizable, say, multi-100,000 tonnage of high-grade copper deposits?
Multi-100 million tons. A few 100,000 tons.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I have to correct myself. Multi-100 million ton.
Just the footprint of the deposit, the thickness of what was cut in OC1. We have fragmentary information on the other holes that were drilled that showed similar kinds of thickness and grade. So you can start doing back of the envelope calculations of what volume is down there. And you just have to keep drilling to keep proving it out. But if you see something, if it needs to be this big on the surface to make that, and what you're seeing looks like this, which is what we're doing. I mean, the footprint that we can identify already for Hot Breccia is comparable to the footprint of the Resolution deposit, which is one of the biggest porphyries ever found on the planet. So just because the footprint is the same size doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the same size deposit, but it's in the same neighborhood. It shows a lot of the same characteristics, so it's a reasonable bet that that's what's down there.
Could you give an overview of the geologic properties of the Hot Breccia project?
Well, the geology, I mean, really, we've got typical Paleozoic carbonate sequences that lie on the property that are very common across Arizona. And Arizona is actually a really wonderful environment for porphyries. You've got the laramide orogeny generated a lot of these intrusive, polyphased intrusives that brought in the hot acidic fluids that I was describing earlier. And then because of the host stratigraphy, when those fluids interact with the carbonate rocks, it really creates a wonderful dynamic where the deposited mineralization can be quite concentrated and relatively high grade. And that's why you see in a lot of places in Arizona, some fairly exceptional high grade mineralization. That's certainly what you see at Resolution, where there are not a lot of deposits in the world that compete with not only the huge size but also the grade of the deposit there.
And what is a Hot Breccia?
The name of the property is derived from the fact that we've got these breccias that are on the property, and really what they are is they're the rock fragments that have been dragged up the surface in a very violent, explosive event that would have taken place over a very short period of time. It would have taken seconds for this to happen, where you have this release of pressure from depth, and then the rock being broken up, transported to the surface very quickly in a slurry, including magma. So you'd have molten rock that was carrying these rock fragments up the surface. And then when it got to surface, it solidified. The magma cooled and actually locked everything in place. And so that's why we call it hot breccias. We found these breccias that were not only were they hot and indicated that the temperature that was around during the formation process, but they're also hot because they've got this hot looking alteration and mineralization in the rock fragments that were brought up. So I guess it's got a couple of different plays on the words there.
Do you have multiple sort of Breccia pipes or?
Yeah, it's really interesting that there are several different Breccia pipes that are identified on the property, and great observation from our chief exploration officer was that when you go over to the edges of the property, you actually find the geology quite boring. And as you get more to the center of the property, you get all this faulting, you get dikes showing up, you get all these wonderful breccias that are showing up, and so on. And we believe that that's a good way of mapping out where the heat source is down below. We think that all of this chaos that we're seeing on surface is related to the energy that's generated by laramide intrusive down deep.
So the Skarn, altered limestone, is that classed in the Breccia, or how does it work?
Yeah, so the breccias, I mean, it's fairly well known that when you take a limestone and you add some fluid and a lot of heat and pressure, you're going to end up with a garnet magnetite skarn quite often. And that's exactly what we're seeing, is we're seeing those brown lumps that we saw in the photographs during the presentation. Those are garnet magnetite skarns. And they're not identifiable as limestones now, but because we know where they came from, we've seen this many times before, it's our belief that originally those rock fragments were limestones. They were just heavily altered.
Perfect. And do you know how many mineralizing events that it has been subject to?
No, but we can tell you that it's many. We see lots of evidence that there's polyphased alteration events, which relates to the how many pulses of fluids would have come in and how many pulses would have come along with these polyphased intrusives. And that's really one of the strong indicators that we're looking for a big, long-lived system, right? The big, long-lived systems, the ones that have a lot of heat and a lot of different phases to them, are the ones that generate the highest grade and the biggest volume of metal mineralization. So those are good indicators for us.
Do you think that Hot Breccia and Christmas Mine stem from the sort of the same intrusion?
Well, it's certainly our hope. I mean, just drawing on the analog with resolution, where the small magma mine was really the upper leakage from the resolution, if you want to put it in very simple terms. We're hoping that same dynamic is in place, and that Christmas Mine really is the upper leakage from something much bigger and more substantial that might be lurking at depth at the Hot Breccia property. So that's the exploration model that we're building on.
And why was the Christmas Mine shut down? What was the main reason for it?
The main reason was the drop in copper price. So when the copper price fell so dramatically in the early 1980s, there was a lot of mines that actually shut down. There was just a glut of copper on the market, and the smaller, more marginal mines weren't able to survive. There was a number of mines that got shut down during that time period.
How large is the surface footprint?
That anomaly that we generated, the ZTEM anomaly, is about the same size as the footprint of the resolution deposit. So, it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges, but really it's a very strong indicator to us that we're looking for something that's the scope and scale of a resolution when we see the size of the geophysical anomaly that we've got. That's not mineralization yet. We've got to do the drilling to be able to show how big the footprint of mineralization is at Hot Breccia, but we're off to a good start.
And what are you seeing on the surface that indicates that there could be a significant copper deposit down there?
Well, as I mentioned, all the chaos that we see with the different faults and dikes and so on surface, it gets really interesting when you're doing the mapping in the Williamson volcanics part of the system. But one of the things that really stands out, of course, is the fact that we actually have mineralized fragments in the breccias that are coming to surface. So we see these beautifully mineralized pieces of rock from down below that have malachite and azurite leaking out of them, which are copper minerals, and indicating very strong mineralization. One of the other things that I'll point out is that the whole property is riddled with old mine workings, And so when I've got an old mines report from 1925, and you can see that back in 1925, there was a number of small mines, they called them at that time. They were very small to me, but at that time they were mines. And small workings where the old timers were going in and they'd find high grade seams and they would drive in after them. And in a lot of cases, they were gold mines. Now, it's kind of interesting that a lot of the copper mineralization in Arizona doesn't have necessarily a lot of gold associated with it, but these systems did have gold in them. And when you get out into the periphery of the system, when you're either in the high levels or out on the periphery, you get into the epithermal gold mineralization. And so we feel that this is another piece of evidence that we can use for metal zonation to help lead us to the heart of the system, where we're hoping that we're going to be able to find the highest grade copper. So, our belief is that the little workings were on the upper end of the system. There was leakage from the big copper system that may be down below.
When you're looking for a large Skarn-hosted copper deposit, if I'm not mistaken, could you give us some ballpark intervals on the size of the price?
Well, it's kind of interesting. When the exploration work was done in the 1970s, of course, the picture that they had in their mind's eye then was finding another San Manuel. San Manuel was the big boy in the neighborhood at that time. Since then, the discovery of resolution has changed the art of the possible for us. Now that there's a 1.6 billion ton, 1.6% copper deposit out there, of course, this is the standard that we want to go for. And, I think the idea is that we would love to see an intercept of high grade mineralization. When I'm talking high grade, I'm talking 1% copper. And, over what distance, I don't know. The first intercept that the Resolutions guys had when they were operating the magma mine, they hit about 35 meters of 2% copper, I think it was the first indication that they were getting close to a resolution. Well, it doesn't sound all that exciting to find something like that at depth, but I think that if we found an intercept like that, we'd probably be doing cartwheels, because it would mean that we're on the right track.
Your main target is the Skarn. Do you think that the porphyry, or if there's any porphyry, or just the intrusive body, could be economically mineralized? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. So here's the thing: is in Arizona, quite often it's hard to distinguish between what's Skarn and what's porphyry. Quite often these porphyries get placed into country rock that are carbonates, and when you do that, you don't get the normal big hydrothermal cells that set up. You get this more immediate reaction between the acidic fluids and the carbonate host rocks. And so quite often it's, and I think resolution is the perfect example of this. It's a porphyry that, one of the main alteration features in the porphyry is Skarn alteration. So, it's hard to have a definitive line saying it's this or that. It's kind of a combination of the two.
Okay, that's a good point. But there's also a dike swarm, which I think also hosts copper mineralization. How does that interact with the Skarn?
Yeah, well, I think the dike swarm is really just a part of that laramide intrusive event. The big intrusive that we know of in the area, of course, is the Christmas stalk. And that's over at the Christmas mine. It really hasn't been mined, but the Freeport actually did a drill program a few years ago, and they've defined 300 plus million tons of 3.5%, or sorry, not 3.5, 0.35% copper there. And probably too low grade to be a mine, or certainly not a Freeport size target at the stage. But those bodies are very important. That's polyphased intrusive that brought an awful lot of metal into the system. And that's what resulted in that high-grade mineralization that was mined at Christmas. And, I've seen it multiple times down in Mexico, where you can identify the causative intrusive that is not a mine itself, but the surrounding rocks. You actually get these beautiful high-grade mineralized mantos and skarn deposits that are mineable. So it's a very complex system. And how it's actually going to manifest itself with hot breccia, we don't know yet until we do the drilling.
You have a model though with different stratas, starting with volcanics, then you get the limestone. How confident are you about the model?
Well, we're pretty confident because we've got so many different pieces of evidence to draw from, including the old drilling. I mean, we don't have the drill core to go back and refer to, but we do have what I would refer to as quick logs, so the basic geology and alteration description from those drill holes. We've got the breccias, and we can go out, and that's one of the reasons why we're out doing the detailed mapping on those breccias earlier this year, was to be able to understand more and more about the geology at depth that we can't see. But Mother Nature has been kind enough to do the sampling program for us and bring it up to surface so that we could take all of those pieces of information and put them into the model.
And at what depth does your targets zone, i.e. the limestones, start at?
I believe the limestones are going to start about 400 meters below surface. And, they're about 600 meters thick in this area. So they should go from about 400 meters depth to a kilometer depth. That's why we're talking about 1 kilometer deep drill hole.
Fantastic. And what else? I mean, if there's not copper that causes the ZTEM, the conductive anomaly in the ZTEM survey, what else could it be?
Well, there's a number of things that can cause an anomaly, and we won't know until we drill it. Geophysics is not a 100% surefire thing. This is just one of the indicators that we use. But I can tell you, I can say with great confidence that we're going to start out in a very strong hydrothermal system, because we've got the old drill holes there that have proven already that there's a strong hydrothermal system at depth, and we're going to be starting out in that same area. So this is a good place for us to start. We're just not going to end up in the same place where the previous drilling ended up. We're going to be moving where the vectors indicate we should be going to get closer to the heart of the system.
Could you remind me what type of grades and also widths were found in the old, especially in the more exciting old drill holes?
Yeah, that's one of the disappointing things about hearing that the old core was taken to the dump and thrown away, because we can't go back and re-examine it, and we don't have the assays that go along with the old drill logs. What we do have are a number of old reports and memos that we've been able to extract information from. We know there was a lot of samples that were over 1% copper and some that were over 3% copper. So there were good grades that were being intercepted, but we don't have all of the assay information. So unfortunately, that's a limitation of the drill data set.
But then, if the Skarn contains magnetite or magnetite bearing, shouldn't the mag survey work quite well in this project?
Yeah, well, it depends on how extensive the magnetite is, right? There's a little bit of a filter in that. If the magnetite bodies are too small and they're too deep, then magnetite survey or mag surveys on surface aren't going to be able to pick it up as easily. But we're not going to limit ourselves in terms of knowing what's going to work and what won't work. It's our intention to be using downhole geophysics as the drill program progresses, and the geologists are going to be attentive to looking at what we're seeing in the core to try and figure out what geophysical techniques we should be using. And one of the, mag is a relatively inexpensive survey to do, so we'll certainly be doing magnetic surveys down the hole as we're drilling.
So with the results from ExploreTech, by the way, do you have the results from ExploreTech, or is that yet to be done?
That's yet to be done. We were still building the model, and the reason for that is we did come across an old database that had some information on the property, including the detailed geologic logs from drill hole number 1 that was drilled back in the early 70s. And so we were updating our model based on that recently acquired information. And as a result, we've held off on them running their program. But it hopefully will be run very quickly here. We're certainly attentive to the fact that drill season might be upon us very quickly, and so we want to make sure that we get that completed well in advance of that.
With the results from ExploreTech, do you feel that now that you have everything to start drilling?
Oh, I think that we've got everything. I mean, you could always second guess yourself and say, well, maybe we should do a ground-based magnetotelluric survey. But at this point, I think we've got enough evidence that we know where to start, and we need to get the first 5 drill holes into the ground so that we can start feeling our way in the system and get some of those first-hand indicators instead of looking at drill logs that were created by geologists 50 years ago, geologists that we don't know 50 years ago. Let's get some fresh core on the table and start making our own assessment of what's going on down at depth.
Do you feel comfortable regarding sort of fault zones, and also if there are, I don't know how the ground is, but if there's large voids or caves are typical?
We've actually got limited information to go on in terms of the ground conditions, what the drillers encountered 50 years ago. But one of the very positive indicators that I've got is I was able to drop a pebble down one of the old drill holes. We've been able to find all the old drill holes. They're still open. And I was able to drop a pebble down one of them, and I could hear it rattling away for probably 20 seconds going down the hole. So I know that hole is still very open. And, so that's a good indication to me. There's no swelling plays in the area, and the drill conditions should be pretty good.
Awesome. So then, could you tell me, how will you conduct this program, and where will you first start?
Well, we're going to start where we know we're in the heart of the system. So we'll probably be going close to drill hole 1. It was drilled a long time ago, and we know that was a very well altered drill hole, and then we'll start to work our way out from there based on the interpreted geophysical results.
You will first twin one hole, and then, based on that, everything probably will change.
Yeah, I think we'll make sure. That's one of the reasons why we want to make sure we start out with one drill and not bring 2 drills onto the property. I think one hole at a time, so that we can use all of the information that we gather from that hole, including the downhole geophysics that we're going to be running on drill hole number 1. That's going to help us visualize where we go through for the next setup and the third setup and the fourth. And of course, we'll have a little bit of flexibility having permitted these 10 drill pads. It's going to give us the opportunity to pick and choose a little bit where we go and how far we step out.
Yes, but I'd like to add something on that, if I may, please. So something I'm passionate about. So as we've discussed earlier, I don't have a technical background, not a background in geology, but I feel I've got some of the best minds in the business around me. And so I look at me as the corporate finance guy, the communicator, and take all of that geological plans to drill hot breccia and communicate that in a comprehensive way to the investor. So the first thing is listening to guys like Steve, getting what their program is going to be, summarize that, and tell that to the market. One of the problems with retail investors, I like to say, is that nowadays everybody's is an expert in reading headlines that have grades, right? and a lot of market activity by retail investors is based on headlines. We don't manage geological plans by headline. So we will be communicating the entire plan before we start and managing expectations. And what people will know ahead of time is what we will do, why we're going to do it. And then, it might very well be that, the first hole is to gain a certain amount of information, a certain type of information for the team. And so I've read and talked to people about, let's go with your juiciest hole to start with, and what are we supposed to say? What's the juiciest hole? No, we want to do what's right, geologically speaking, and we're not going to put together a geological plan, an exploration plan, a drill plan based on the type of headlines it might generate.
No, I mean, you're after a discovery, and that's what ultimately will drive real value.
Correct. And then on that point, Jasper, so I love everything about zonation. I learned a little bit from some renowned geologists about lithium zonation and how you start with the barrel and then the cesium tantalum, and away from the source you can get some lithium. And And I like hearing Peter and Craig and Steve talk about similar things as it relates to what we're looking for here. So if you get low copper, high zinc as an example, well, it might disappoint retail investors, but it might be extremely valuable information for the geologist and to vector into, where the source might be. So to me, every hole is an important hole. Every hole tells a story, and but we will make sure we set all the right expectation to our shareholders. And the same thing that we're doing at Palos Verdes, right? So we're telling very precisely the objective of the 3 phases of drilling. So people should be able to assess the risk, assess the potential, and let the drill bit do its thing, and the assay results are always the final judge of what's there or not there.
What grades are required to have an economic ore body at Hot Breccia?
I don't think there's any way to tell that until we actually see the depth of the ore body, the metallurgy, all sorts of things will go into calculating that, right? And so we know that the grades that are in the general area, there's been a lot of economic deposits in the area. Resolution's cut off is 1% copper, and they're looking a lot deeper than what we're looking at for a prospective horizon. So, we have a general idea, but until we actually see sort of the size, orientation, and composition of the mineralization, we won't be able to determine.
Yeah, of course, but I mean, at least it's probably above 0.5, but it's probably less than 1%. Is that a correct statement, given that you don't have any serious metallurgical issues, which you probably won't have?
Those are probably pretty good brackets to use. It's certainly going to need to be better than 0.5% copper, and given that resolution's cut off of 1%, that's a pretty good indication. We can probably be less than that if we're looking at 1/3 the depth.
Excellent. And I mean, this is a complex system, and 5 holes might not result in a discovery, at least a true discovery. What would you like to see in order to continue with a follow-up program?
Well, I think just continuing to build the geologic knowledge base, right? We want to make sure that we're in the hydrothermal system. And once we're in the hydrothermal system, there's, a myriad of geologic indicators that you look for to indicate where you're at, where the fluids are coming from, where the center of the system is, where you're going to find those higher grade copper zones. And we have to, as geologists, we have to assemble all those pieces of evidence and put them together before we come to the conclusion of where we should be going with the next program. So, that's it takes a lot of teamwork and a highly experienced group that has seen a lot of these types of deposits before to be able to put all that together. So it's difficult to answer that question in a sentence or two.
I want to add to that because that's a very important topic, right? So five holes are 1,000 meter. What if there's not, call it a discovery hole? And I think the 3 of us know what that means. And so let's look at a discovery hole. Let's say Hercules Silver, where their market cap shot up by 10 times on a particular hole. So there might be a hole like that in the 5 holes that we're going to drill, or there might not be. And then people say, well, is it hit or miss? And I actually have a question, if I may, for Steve, because geologists don't look at it as hit and miss, right? That's a retail investor mentality, right? So is there the big hole and then I'm wealthy overnight? Or is there a hole that I, as an investor, I'm not really excited about, but it might be that the geologists are very excited about? And then you might want to also say, Steve, that that the big prize, which is resolution, there was a series of very encouraging holes that were drilled into this thing, but it took a while for people to go, oh wow, this is absolutely gigantic. So again, I'm raising this, Jasper, just to make sure that we manage expectations of investors.
Yeah, we talked about metal zonation earlier as well, Jasper, and I talked about the gold that was found in the higher levels of the system on the property. one of the other indications that was kind of interesting to me, one of the old drill holes hit some substantial zinc mineralization that was over a fairly significant distance. I can't remember the thickness, but it was close to 5% zinc. And that's another distal indicator, right? So if you look at Peter Megaw's classic CRD model, where he talks about metal zonation, where you go from the copper skarn out into the lead, zinc, silver mantos, and then outbound of that, in the periphery of the system, you get into the high grade epithermal gold and silver. And you know, when you see the zinc showing up as strong as it was in that drill hole, you know, move in the other direction would be the indication. But that's only one of the many indicators that you would look for in terms of, are we getting hotter or are we getting colder? And these systems happen to be very complex. And then, of course, Mother Nature throws in a few complications by faulting things and shifting them around as well. And so it's really hard to wrap your head around all the dynamics that are happening in the ore forming process. But every time you drill a drill hole, you get more information, and it just helps put the pieces of the puzzle together.
So firstly, Palos Verdes, do you own 100% of it, or do you have any earn agreement?
Yes, so we have an option agreement for 100% of it. If I'm not mistaken, there's one last payment of $50,000 US in November, and then we can exercise. The party that holds the option is actually a local geologist, and the last 3 payments he's requested to get that paid in shares of our company, Prismo. So he's building a position. I mean, he's worked there. He worked for Vizsla. He knows the Panuco District very well, probably better than most. And so he's, through his options payment, is building a position in Prismo, which is certainly, I like.
What royalties are there on Palos Verdes?
There are no royalties, if you can believe that.
Will the option holder, will he receive a royalty?
No.
Could you tell us about the geologic setting of the Panuco district?
I'll say Panuco is a classic Mexican epithermal vein camp. It's been in production since the mid-1600s. Historic estimates are historical production was better than 300 million ounces of silver, plus a lot of gold. Between the work that's being done by our strategic partners in the district, Vizsla, who've proved up another 200 plus million ounces of silver, that's a 500 million ounce silver deposit. There's only 15 billion ounce known silver deposits in the world. And there's a big gap between the billion and the 500 million ounces. There's not very many that fall in that gap. So once you hit 500, the chances of getting bigger are pretty good. And Palos Verdes is a small portion of that overall Panuco system. We have 750 meters of strike length on a vein that has given us some pretty good numbers, up to thousands of parts per million silver, up to 100 grams gold. And the drill rig is turning now to see if we can track that vein further to depth. We've drilled it as far, the western piece of it, we've drilled as far as we could with the permits we had and with the drilling geometry we could get from drilling within our own claims. The eastern part of the vein is cut off by a fault and displaced, and so we're trying to find that. And one of the benefits of having the strategic partnership with Vizsla is that we can drill the down dip part of the west vein from a permitted pad on their property, and we're chasing the east vein the same way from drill pads on their property. So everything looks like we are at the very top of one of the veins, the type of vein that you see in that district. So the goal is to chase it to depth. It's interesting that we're seeing as much gold as we are, because we're on where Vizsla is working is in the western part of the district, which historically was known as silver plus gold. The central part of the district, where I did most of my work for Kennecott, was silver only, or very little gold. And now in the northeastern part of the district, the gold is coming back in. So something's going on that we don't understand. But working from the principle that all of these different styles of mineralization compositions are part and parcel of a very large integrated ore system tells you that there's more going on than we understand yet, which is pretty exciting when you can get into a historic district like this that's had hundreds of years of continuous production and exploration, and you can find blind veins that no one has seen before, and they turn out to be big enough to give you hundreds of millions of ounces of silver and resources. You got another vein in the district that looks very similar and is showing very good gold grades as well as the silver. That's exciting stuff. We're learning more and more about how these big epithermal systems work as an ore system rather than just one vein or another, which is sort of the historic way people have looked at these districts. And so we're recognizing that the center of mineralization can move around in one of these districts over time. So that just opens up huge possibilities in systems like this.
So could you, given the context that we're seeing here, explain the purpose of the drilling program? Yeah, you have several purposes, as you have a fault here, and then you have also a northern zone, which you might be coming to depending on the results in the southwest zone.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, could you explain where you will put your first holes and what you hope to learn from them?
The first thing to point out is the heavy red line on the western side. Well, actually, first thing to point out is that almost north-south band that runs across the map. That's the post-mineral fault that offsets the vein. On the left of that, which is on the west, you see the heavy red curved line. That's the Palos Verdes vein. And to the right of the big fault, you can see a series of thinner red lines extending to the northwest, a number of parallel lines. That's the vein on the other side of the fault. So it's been dropped down, and in the process of dropping down because of the fact that it's dipping to the southeast, so toward the lower right-hand corner, when it moves down, it also shifts laterally. The yellow line is the limit of the property. So previously all of our drilling was done with short holes inside of that yellow boundary. All those black lines that you see that are diagonal to the upper left, those are the planned drill holes for the current program. So all of those are colored on Vizsla's property outside of the Palos Verdes claim. And the first ones to be drilled are the ones on the left-hand side, which is chasing the vein that we have a better idea where the western piece of the vein is because we have a number of holes in it. And we've gotten some very good intercepts out of that. The holes moving to the upper right, which is going progressively to the northeast, are holes that are designed to find where all of those veins that you see shown on the map, all those little red lines come together. Typically, epithermal veins do what we call horsetailing. So as they approach the surface, they split up into a whole bunch of parallel veins. And what you want to do is track those back to where they form one or two solid veins. And so that's a lot of what the holes to the north on the northeast end are doing, is to try to find those individual structures, which may be very well mineralized, and track them down to where they coalesce into a very large vein. But again, this is characteristic of the uppermost part of a vein. So there would be every reason to believe that mineralization in that vein, once it coalesces, will continue for 300, maybe 400 meters depth. So you can get a very nice ore shoot in that kind of distance.
And what does the success look like?
Success on the west of the fault will look like a nice multi-meter vein intercept with nice high-grade silver and gold mineralization in it. So hundreds of grams of silver, anywhere from 3 to 100 grams of gold. Those would be the kinds of numbers that would tell you that things are coming together. On the eastern side, it would be something like that, or it could simply be a progression of seeing those individual structures coalescing into a single big vein, which might not have huge values in it where we first find it. It will probably tell us we need to go deeper on the east side, but being able to track all those veins as they coalesce is what success would look like there. Obviously, having them all coalesce with nice grades in them would be even better.
What could be the size of the prize, ultimately?
Well, I mean, I think what you want to do is compare to one of the ore shoots that Vizsla has developed on their side of the property. The Napoleon vein would be a very nice one to have 750 meters of. I mean, this is not a giant claim. It just seems to be centered right on top of a very nice looking vein. So, it could be several 100,000 or a couple of million ounces of silver with who knows how much gold. I mean, the real surprise here to me was to have that much gold show up, like the 100-gram gold that we released last year. And it doesn't take a whole lot of gold to change your economics pretty dramatically. I mean, I love silver, don't get me wrong, but a few grams of gold as a sweetener can make all the difference in your economics.
But just to confirm, did you say a few 100,000 or a couple of million ounces?
I think a few million ounces is probably the safest thing to say at this point.
But you say a few million ounces, but then you compare it with Napoleon, which has, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but 100 million, 50 million ounces of silver, something like that.
Yeah, I'd love to have this grow that big. I'm not gonna. I'm conservative. I'll start with a few million, and if it gets to 100, well, that's great. But we have to grow this thing a little bit at a time. You've got to walk before you run.
You're doing a 2-stage program. Why a 2-stage program?
Well, because you want to reassess after you have results, right? So we are starting on the west side of the fault where we have had much success in drilling bonanza grade, half a meter at 11.5 kilos silver equivalent, and on and on and on. So we are chasing that vein at depth, and so I would say once we do the first 2 holes, let's say, well, what do we do? What if we don't see it? What if we see it? Where if it's a little at a different angle or different place than expected? And the question will be, do we continue there on the west side of the fault? Do we do a 3rd hole or 4th hole? And when do we move to the east side, which is a little bit more exploration? Because as I mentioned in the presentation, the vein seems to be displaced at depth. So then once we move to that part of the exploration program, what do we do? If in the first 3 holes we don't find it, or if we do? So just to give us a chance to reassess the priorities, and those priorities should always be driven by what the assay results tell us.
When are you going to start drilling?
Well, we're we've got the crews on site right now, but there's setup work that needs to be done. We have to secure the water source and build the first few drill pads and so on before we actually get the drill turning. So it'll be in the order of 4 or 5 days, I would expect. Might be a little bit longer, depending on what the guys find.
So in other words, when the time that this interview goes online, you will be drilling.
There's a good chance, yes.
And assay results. When do you expect the first batch of assays to be out?
Well, the labs down in Mexico have been really good in terms of being able to staff up to meet the demand, and so the turnaround times have been excellent. Less than a month for the samples that were submitted. Mexico.
And Steve, that also, the answer to that question also leads us into, and I'll let you answer that. Will we release assay results hole by hole, phase by phase? And I know you have strong views about that kind of thing. And we all know that our friend and colleague Peter Megaw has very strong views on that too. So it might be interesting to discuss that a bit.
I won't speculate on where Peter lands on that spectrum. I'll let him do that. But I'm kind of a middle of the road guy. I don't want to have the market dictate when we should be releasing results. I think it's more important that we release the results in the order that they make sense. And so we're drilling a program, and I want to be able to put the results out there. I think when we have something that's material, and also, you know, aware of the fact that we've got an invested group an invested group that wants to follow along our progress, and so we want to keep them satisfied as well. But I'm certainly not a hole by hole guy. I think that's especially in a program like we're going to be drilling down at Palos Verdes, where the drilling shouldn't take that long for these shorter holes, and it would be my preference to be able to batch them together and release them in an order that makes sense to the team.
If I may add to that, my view on this is that, and that's the capital markets guy talking, is that the company needs to communicate on a regular basis what it's doing, and our company has a history of doing that. And what does that mean? So if you go back a couple of weeks, we had a news release saying that we've retained a driller for Palos Verdes. We're going to be on site on such and such and such a date. And so we're happy to communicate that. And then if you look at our social media, you can see numerous pictures of the staff being on site. So our staff, Vizsla staff, the drillers, and so on and so forth, because regular communication is very, very important. Not everything is material, and not everything should be disclosed by news releases, especially as it relates to assay results, because one set of assay results can be misleading if it's either good or bad, right? So then I defer to the geologists for that. But very often we do interviews, and then we post them on our website, our YouTube channel. So even if we don't release hole by hole, there's always quite a bit of information about where we're at, what we're doing. People will know what we're drilling, where we're drilling, why we're doing it, and if you look at, let's say, when we drilled on the east part of the fault at Palos Verdes, late last year, early last year, we didn't release the results right away, and people were saying, "Well, why don't you release the results?" And the answer was simply, we don't know what it means, right? So why are we not seeing what we're expecting to see? And so we got the technical committee together. They looked at this. We did more work, surface work. We looked at what Vizsla had done in the past when they encountered similar situations. And then we put all of that together, because then we were getting to a possible answer as to where's the vein on the east side of the fault. And then the technical people were comfortable with the theory that they had, and they were ready to communicate it with the market. And so hopefully that gives more color to your audience about how we do things. So we'll review all the assay results as they come in. We'll determine if it's worthwhile as a one-off. But investors can always expect, and should always expect, us to communicate in all sorts of ways and keep them apprised of where we're at in the drilling campaign.
If you're successful at Palos Verdes with your drill program, I mean, what's the size potential of it?
I would say the first thing is the strike length that's on our property is 750 meters. The initial discoveries of Vizsla were 600, then expanded to 900, then 1100 meters, and so on and so forth. We know that our vein extends to the west side of our property and the east side. And so this is me talking, certainly from just a potential standpoint. There could be something of great value there. And what do I mean by great value? Well, we know that Prismo Metals has given a right of first refusal to Vizsla to purchase the asset. And as we mentioned, it's the asset. What's the asset? Well, the asset is, you could say, well, it's what's underneath our property, but really, I mean, it doesn't know the boundaries of our property, what's there. And what would it take for Vizsla to decide to purchase the asset? I think they need to have a view on something that moves the needle for them, and they've got two large veins that are part of their resources, mainly part of their resources, and so I think that I'd leave it at that. So something that moves the needle for a $500 million company, and that's what we're trying to identify. So maybe I leave it at that, Steve, and turn it over to you.
Putting on my technical hat on again, speaking as a geologist, I don't understand the district as well as some because I haven't had boots on the ground yet, but I will at this time next week, and I'll be going down there for my inaugural tour of the Panuco District. But my understanding is that some of the veins that the Vizsla's resource is based on were not very impressive at surface, and yet when they drilled down deeper and got underground, they realized the significant potential of them. They blew out in terms of both size and grade. And so I think that really the sky's the limit in terms of what the upside potential could be on our project. Obviously, there's a vein there. There's lots of structures. We know that we've got some fault. I mean, these are classic things that happen in this district, and I think that we're very encouraged that we've got a lot of those indicators that don't close the door on us having the same sort of potential that we're seeing anywhere else.
That's a great point, and also to show that, I mean, the size of the prize is big, so. I mean, Vizsla Silver, yeah, they certainly has the currency, and they're actively consolidating Panuco. They have 2 times this year added large land positions to the Panuco, the district. So, if the drilling program is successful at Palos Verdes, do you expect to have proven enough in order to be able to sell it?
Well, so the way I always answer this question is putting myself in my shoes, and then putting myself in Mike Connor's shoes, who's the CEO of Vizsla, a great guy. Him and I did the original deal and have a great working relationship, and he's built a fantastic company. So my view is I'm going to balance. I say me and the rest of the team. We will balance what we have now, let's say, after the next phase or 2 of drilling, and compared to our market cap. So do I think I've got a $40 million asset compared to a $12 million market cap? Or do I want to maximize it and turn this into something more meaningful? So that's the way I'm going to look at it. And again, when I say me as the finance guy, but obviously Steve and Craig and everybody else will have a big say into what we do. And if I'm Mike Connor, he can't possibly take on a small asset. He can't possibly be throwing a bunch of money at exploration. I think Vizsla has made it clear that they were focusing on their PEA, and they're on one path, and it'd be hard for them to pivot away from that. So it might be that we continue to delineate what's there, but that's a decision that we'll be making together here in the next little while, before the end of the year. And I'll take Mike out for lunch and see how he feels. Steve, you want to sell early, or you want to sell, or you want to maximize the asset?
Look, it's my position that we should try to get the best understanding of the vein system possible, and it's too early now. clearly. Whether we're going to be there at the end of the next drill program or not, I don't know. But we'll have to wait and see how the next 10 drill holes go. But if we feel comfortable that we've really got a handle on what the system is looking like, then hopefully we can assign a value to it. And if we can come to an agreement with somebody on a good price to sell it, then that'll be a good position for us. But if there's still a lot of question marks hanging out there, then we'll probably be in a position where we're going to want to find more information before we put a value.
I think we could move over to your third project. Could you walk us through the Los Pavitos project?
Okay, Los Pavitos is the earliest stage property that we have. It was optioned from Minera Cascabel, which is the company I formed 35 years ago in Mexico with some partners. And one of our associates, Rafael Guillardo, identified Pavitos probably 10 years ago. It's in southern Sonora in the Alamos mining district, which, like Panuco, has been in production since the middle 1600s. It was important enough as a mining center for the Spanish that they had a mint there, which is an important feature. Right now, there's a porphyry copper mine practically next door that's in operation. Minorum Gold is exploring their Alamos project, which I was also involved with, which is a series of silver veins. And Rafael recognized that to the west of that, but still within the same infrastructure, so highway, power lines, rail, water, all the things that you need to make a mine in a very friendly mining jurisdiction. Pavitos has a series of veins cutting across the property that historically were mined on an artisanal basis for very high-grade gold. But it was all artisanal work. Nobody's ever tried before to put the district together and understand what's there. There's a lot of geology there that looks like the geology of northwestern Sonora, where a lot of large-scale gold mining is going on. The same kind of rocks that occur up there dip underneath younger rocks, and then they come out again down in this particular region. So we have the potential both for high-grade epithermal veins and broadly disseminated northwestern Sonora style gold mineralization. So it's a big property. It's over 5,000 hectares, and we control the whole property package. So we've gotten some very good numbers off of early drilling in and around some of the old workings. And now we're expanding and tracking those structures laterally, essentially under slightly younger rocks. They're not the young rocks I talked about a minute ago, but there's sort of a window in the geology where the erosion has cut deeply and exposed the tops of these veins, but you can track the structures outside of that little depression into the surrounding rocks, and the veins are completely untouched in those areas. So that's the exciting part, is to be able to track that mineralization in that area.
What's the plan, both short-term plan for Los Pavitos and also long-term plans, since you already have two projects that are obviously very attractive?
Yeah, I love this question because I really think this, and I mentioned this earlier in the presentation, I think this Prismo is a three-legged stool. And I really do think that we have three great projects, but they're all at different stages of their exploration history or exploration development. And, Los Pavitos is a project that, isn't going to be as expensive in 2024 as the other two projects, but it's going to be equally important that we make sure that we give that project what it needs. It needs to have boot leather and bedrock, and crews out on the ground and doing some of that great basic systematic exploration work. It's going to set it up well for the next phase. And quite frankly, I mean, this is a huge project that is in a well-known orogenic gold district that could be an absolute company maker deposit. And so we don't want to dismiss the value of Los Pavitos any more than we would Palos Verdes or Hot Breccia. All three projects are very important to the company moving forward. And I think this year all three projects are going to get what they need It's just going to be a different level of expenditures for each project, but they all are in important parts of their development.
Great. So then you said that you would like to start drilling at the Hot Breccia this September. How much money would you like to raise in order to be able to fund that program? 5,000 meters.
We think that the program's going to be $2 million US, so we'd like to go out and raise 3 million Canadian to be able to facilitate that program.
You have Vizsla shares worth 1.2 million Canadian. They're very liquid. How do you balance that between? I mean, you could raise less and then sell them. How do you do that?
So, as you might expect, we've had people come to us and suggest that. There when you have a junior exploration company, it always feels pretty good to have a bit of extra as opposed to not so much, and being tight, it causes stress on management, unnecessary stress. It puts you in a position where you might not make the best decisions for the company, and so, and then if you factor in the fact that Steve and I, we've been to Montreal, we've been to Quebec City, we've been to Zurich, Munich, Frankfurt, and so on in California, and there is interest and appetite for financing the Hot Breccia drilling, and one of the reasons there is appetite is some people look at Hercules 10 times the market cap on one hole, but we have 53 million shares outstanding. I think at the time they probably had, I don't know, I don't want to probably be incorrect here, but at least 150, maybe 200 million, a million shares outstanding, and so people like the risk reward ratio, and I think it would feel pretty good and send a good message to the market to say, well, we've raised this, and and here are the parties that were involved supporting us, and I think that's the appropriate. Would we ever change our mind? Maybe. We're in negotiation with the driller. It's pretty aggressive in wanting our work. So maybe that creates an opportunity for us to look at things differently. Never say no. Always leave all the options on the table. But the plan here remains to raise 3 million in early September, and as I said, we've been working on that for a couple of months now.
And do you expect, so timing of financing is in a couple of weeks? Do you expect to have a similar structure as with the last financing, so half a warrant?
Very likely, and do it the way we did it last time. So announce it, and then after the regulatory wait period on the CSC of 5 business days, then you close. Right? I'm not a big believer in opening up financings and leaving them open.
Yeah, one way to look at this would be, I mean, this is in Arizona. You could drill any time of the year. Why not wait and get the holes out or assay results out for Palos Verdes and see if the market responds positively to that?
So we hear that question too. What?
I don't want
to wait. Okay.
I want to get that.
You see what I have to live with here? No, honestly, I hear that, and you know what? That is not a bad idea. Now but that's a little bit of gambling, right? So if we do that, it means we're gambling that we're going to get excellent results. If we don't have excellent results, it might be good results. There might be very good results, and the market might not react to it. So it's not a bad idea, but you got to weigh the speculative aspect of it, but certainly, as I said, all options are on the table. We do. I'm like Steve. I want to put a drill on the Hot Breccia real quick. So, but there might be more than one way to structure things.
But then, so Vizsla has 9.6%. Do you think they will participate in any future financing, or I mean, what's their plan for their position?
I think that it's fair to say that they would like to see us keep advancing the project, Palos Verdes. And as part of their strategic investment in our company, there are some thresholds of stock ownership they need to retain in order to keep their right of first refusal. And they've indicated to me that they do want to retain those rights, or that important right of first refusal.
How much ownership do they have to retain that right?
Well, just slightly less than where they're at now, and so I think my assumption is because they want to retain the right, they're going to keep investing in, and as you might expect, that there's an understanding from both parties that if that happens, that cash should go to Palos Verdes, and there's no way that Vizsla is going to invest in our company to direct the cash to anything but keep advancing Palos Verdes.
Where do you envision Prismo Metals in 3 years?
Well, that depends a lot on what happens. And this is speaking strictly for me. This isn't company party line or anything. If we're successful at Palos Verdes, I would expect that Vizsla will acquire that property or the company to acquire that property. If we're successful at Hot Breccia, the chances are very good that a major copper producer would, in one way or another, come in to either own that property or do a joint venture with Prismo to take over that property. And if we're successful with the gold exploration at Pavitos, there's a couple of Mexican companies and international companies that would probably be interested in that. All of this is speaking to the fact that as we stand now, Prismo is an exploration company, and one of the biggest mistakes that you see made in our industry is people who are good explorers trying to become producers. It's a very difficult transition. It's a different mindset. It's a different set of skills. It's a different level of financing as well. But the sort of typical traditional way for a junior company like Prismo to generate major value for their shareholders is to prove up a discovery, carry it far enough up the value added curve to get the interest of a major, and keep a big chunk, or as big a chunk as possible, of that property when they are ultimately acquired by that major. So that's I don't see. I guess I don't see Prismo transitioning into a potential producer within 3 years. If they made that decision, that's more like a 10-year timeline. So you're asking where I think we'll be in 3 years. I think we'll have forward-looking statement, at least one, if not two, discoveries under our belt, and working on a third.
So then, a question for both of you. Where do you envision Prismo Metals in 3 years?
You want the blue sky geologist to start off there? I mean, I really think that, the potential that we're looking at with Hot Breccia, this is a swinging for the fences exploration play where the potential is so huge. This could really be a company maker type deposit. And I would hope that in 3 years we could be looking at a market cap that started with a B instead of an M. And that's the vision that I have. Now, whether that comes to be, we have to have the cooperation with Mother Nature and our drill program. But I think the potential is certainly there. That's why I'm here.
So I would say mine is that either Freeport or Asarco would be large shareholders of our company and operating the Hot Breccia project. So why Freeport? Well, because they own the Christmas mine. Why Asarco? Because they own the smelter in the area. They own the Ray mine in the area where Hot Breccia is. I think that we will have sold Palos Verdes to Vizsla, and we'll be sitting on millions and millions of dollars. And and be on our way to make a significant discovery at Los Pavitos.